Welcome to the Rlaarlo Engineering Workshop. Today we will introduce the structure of shock absorbers, installation, and oil replacement. First, we prepare the shock absorbers, needle nose pliers, shock oil, multifunction pliers, and O-ring seal grease. This is a shock absorber assembly. When using the car, if the shock absorber is damaged or the rebound is not smooth, we need to maintain or replace the shock absorber parts. Next, let's demonstrate how to dismantle the shocks. First, compress the spring on the shock absorber. Then remove the spring retainer at the bottom. Then pull out the spring. At this time, compress the shock shaft to see that the shock has no rebound. First, unscrew the shock load adjustment ring at the top of the shock tube. Use needle nose pliers to clamp the edge of the shock tube. Then use multifunction pliers to clamp and unscrew the cap of the shock tube. Take the Omni Terminator monster truck shock as an example. The cap consists of 3 parts: the air bladder, ball head cap, and metal threaded cap. Pour out the existing oil from the shock tube. Clamp the shock core with pliers and unscrew the rod end ball connector. Push the shock shaft up through the shock tube. Unscrew the cap at the bottom of the shock tube. The cap consists of plastic and metal parts. During maintenance, check for any wear and tear. Remove the 2 sealing O-rings and gasket at the bottom of the shock tube. Use needle nose pliers to remove the 2 E-clips and piston ring from the shock shaft. These are all the parts of the shock absorber. When assembling the shock, apply some seal grease to the O-rings to reduce oil leakage. First, put 1 O-ring into the shock tube. Then insert the gasket, followed by the other O-ring. Place the gasket into the bottom cap of the shock tube. Then screw on the cap, but do not tighten it completely. First, install 1 E-clip into the first groove at the bottom of the shock shaft. You can use needle nose pliers to assist. Then insert the piston ring, noting the direction. The groove side faces down. Install the other E-clip into the groove above the piston. Insert the assembled shock shaft into the shock tube and push the threaded end through the bottom hole. Wipe off excess seal grease. Tighten the cap and install the shock end piece. Assemble the top cap of the shock tube. Pay attention to the direction when installing the air bladder. Fill the shock tube with shock oil. Move the shock shaft repeatedly to ensure the oil is evenly filled and the air is expelled. You can fill the shock oil a bit more at first. Then close the cap and compress the shock shaft. If it doesn't compress, it means there's too much oil or too much air. Loosen the cap a bit and compress the shock core. Wipe off excess oil with a paper towel. You can adjust repeatedly until the shock core can be fully compressed and rebounds, indicating it's adjusted correctly. Use needle nose pliers and multifunction pliers to tighten the shock cap. Compress the shock core again to check the rebound. If there's no issue, install the shock adjustment ring. Then install the spring. Compress the spring and install the spring retainer at the bottom. Now the shock absorber is fully assembled. Isn't it easy?